All the judges starting now. Eminent domain is a tool to displace black families and replace their homes with Whole Foods marginalized groups are taken advantage of and presumed guilty and court proceedings. The city justify theft by referencing structural problems they create, cyclically reconcentrating poverty, harming communities, and gentrifying entire areas. Albright 17. The most powerful tool in the gentrification arsenal, eminent domain, and Georgia land can be taken for redevelopment. Cities' rationale uses symptoms of systemic neglect of reason for displacing families from eminent domain cities are given a presumption of public necessity, placing the burden of proof on the homeowner and allow any city to use institutional racism and systemic neglect to advance displacement of low-income black residents. And urban renewal means pushing black residents out. Hundreds of homes were demolished and thousands of black families separated from each other. Community connection reduced further as business left and schools closed. In 96 Olympics, 30,000 low-income residents were displaced from their homes. Landlords raised judgment. Many had no choice but to leave. 1,195 public housing units were gone, and by 2000, only 78 of families were rehoused. 7% of the pre-Olympics population. Project placed extreme demands on pre-existing infrastructure. In 2005, Atlanta proposed a 6,500-acre array of parks, open space, light rail transit, and mixed-use development. 2007 report highlighted an increase in property values that did not bode well for low-income renters and owners. Affordable housing was underfunded. Requirements were 2 weeks of temporary growth, and gentrification increased by 40%. And empirics prove eminent domain is massively racist and targets poor communities of color, especially renters who won't even get compensation at all. Prefer this since it compares the results to other land and finds consensus. Carpenter and Ross 9. Project areas include greater percent of minority residents compared with surrounding communities. Median income in the project areas are less than surrounding communities. Greater percentage of residents in project areas rent their homes compared with residents in surrounding cities. Residents in project areas are significantly more likely to be minorities, less well off, and living rented housing. Results confirm compared with surrounding communities. Significantly more residents targeted by eminent domain of ethnic or racial minority live on significantly less income. Significantly more rent their homes. Such findings are consistent with related illustrating disproportionate effects on minorities and poor. And marginalized communities lack political clout to fight back against eminent domain, ensuring they're taken advantage of by powerful groups and pushed out by gentrification. Cohen 6. Abuse of the process by powerful can go up and eminent domain to confiscate the property of less powerful minority. Powerful interests enrich themselves by burdening a powerless minority. African American communities were destroyed and residents shunned into neighborhoods that became overcrowded and expensive. Supposed beneficiaries of urban renewal ended up paying higher prices. Housing programs consistently fell short of their goals. The primary victims would be the politically powerless. And 2 impacts of gentrification. 1. Displacement caused by eminent domain and gentrification inflicts massive psychological violence and destroys entire communities, denying marginalized people access to communal networks and support. Carpenter Ross 7. Powerlessness in the process negatively affect well-being. Research reveal that psychological implications of those who perceive lack of control over personal circumstances. Displacement elicits negative emotional health reaction due to loss of strong attachments. Displaced residents find it difficult to replicate critical community networks. Urban renewal programs find no compensation for the individual displaced and indignantly inflicted. In 2. Gentrification creates greater police presence since white people call the cops all the time for no good reason. Increased criminalization since random acts like hanging out on the street or criminalizes quality of life crimes in gentrified neighborhoods. Fayad 17. Stepped up law enforcement as part of a larger pattern of increased police in gentrifying areas with low-income neighbors. See an influx of high-income residents. Social dynamics change. One has to do with the perception of safety and the role of the state. Activity was previously considered normal becomes suspicious, and newcomers who are white are inclined to get law enforcement involved. Loitering, hanging out, and noise violations are often reported. 319 calls are increasing in gentrifying areas. Long-term residents find themselves tangled up in the CJS for quality of life crimes. The question of where police directing resources, wherever they direct resources, they find crime gentrifying neighborhoods are a disproportionate spike. Thus, the plan. Resolved. The United States federal government should ban eminent domain for economic development takings and check and see X1 to specify explaining things so we avoid T and theory debates. And ban solves there's no circumvention of growth actually happens even increased valley curve displacement. Anaheim proves the city experienced growth only after banning eminent domain. Pringle 7. Without involvement in the areas blossoming with more economic activity than ever imagined, all of this development occurred without pressure on landowners to tell not only city now use eminent domain. There was no subtle use of power to make property ownership develop. The private sector invested billions in more than 7,000 homes in retail. Eminent domain isn't key to economic development in the 80s. And how attempted to revitalize downtown eminent domain was used. The area never blossomed. Prices on eminent domain. If they fail, far more is lost to the city. It's not pursued through force. Empty lots just sit there idle, tearing off public city and creating superblocks has been a failure. Framework. Assuming a standpoint epistemology where we have the viewpoint of the press is necessary to account for dominant ideologies and institutions which skew our thought process. Middles 5. What I'm saying is ideal theory is idealization and inclusion. The actual ideal theory represents the actual deviation from ideal. Moral theory cannot avoid characterization of human beings. Idealized social ontology will assume the abstract and equal topic individual will abstract away from relations of oppression which profoundly shape the ontology of individuals. Locate them in social hierarchies. So ideal theory nothing will be said on historical ongoing oppression. The way oppression is likely to shape basic social issues will not be part of the theory as social transparency will assume no attention paid to hegemonic ideology sorting perception of social order. Thus the standard of minimizing oppression. Prefer. 1 is act respect. 8 point policy making must be consequential since collective actions occur conflicts couldn't be resolved otherwise. Second straight theories which freeze policy action. And B point, there's no act of mission distinction for states since their policies create permissions and prohibitions. So authorizing action not be an omission since the state assumes culpability regulating the public domain also takes out and turns calculus. Consequences might be hard but is not impossible. The alternative is no action which is worse. 2. Personal identity is non-existence of creates contradictions. Olson 10. If your stream were translated, the shipping would be you. If we destroy one hemisphere, translate the other one, the translate would be you. Now, suppose both hemispheres translated into a different empty head. The true statements will be you, but that cannot be. One cannot be two. A contradiction. This means consequences of ethics can focus on individuals. Since nothing unifies them across time, only states of affairs matter. And 3. Only consequence when explaining degrees of wrongness. You can only explain why breaking promise to take a dying person to the hospital is worse than breaking promise to meet for lunch by appealing to consequences. Now, method. 1. The course in legal sphere have empirically succeeded in creating material change. Specific instances like the app are good uses of the legal system. Seligman 11. Litigation is a tool for change in a long and proud tradition. Cases were brought to challenge discriminatory laws such as Chinese Exclusion Act and advance rights of women and people of color. Battle dismantle Jim Crow culminated in Brown v. Board litigation. The Pope went for change. Environmental justice and disability rights movement showed the path remains open for innovative litigation. And 2. Debates over what the state ought to do in policy action enable students create real and tangible change. Recent empirics prove. Gurney 18. Students at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas debated gun control class. They never met. They prepared to lead a national discussion as a team. Phil doctored research on state laws, brainstormed arguments for and against background checks. They were amassing information to help them formulate arguments on national TV. And it's not just students at Stoneman Douglas team. The teenagers across Broward County joined the call. They have been praised for their composure, well-articulated arguments. Every public school in the county has a debate program. It helped Broward students present themselves on the front lines and never again movement. Software, coffee, wrote a letter. Lawmakers grounded her. Debate class research and also brought debate notes on a trip to move the lawmakers. We definitely moved to a little bit more than it was before the debate program helped. Classmates responded to shooting. Now, underview. 1 AR theories drop the debate around the time to engage in theory debate, get adequate subsequence to get in the 1 AR to match the 6 minute 2 and 2. After RV after one of the counter trips times means you have to do the classify counter trip, otherwise the 2 and can move a big chunk of the 1 AR by kicking the shell. A decent 2 and can divide their time so the 2 AR is almost impossible. Must have the ability to classify counter trip B point key to chill. For nag up playing strap making theory knows because she was understanding what encourages people to read ridiculous shell just to suck time. 3. Evaluating theory with reasonability, key to check back into arbitrary bidirectional interrupts and breadline arguments don't materialize since we have to justify them. 4. Use comparing worlds, two sensing sucks that kills responses to give nag tons of unparalleled ground. Nelson. 8. Two-statement model poses an absolute burden to prove the act is nag acts through range strategies sufficient deniability to make truth statements or prove morality does not exist. Such strategies fundamentally infer the neg with functionally infinite ground. There are nearly infinite skep projection, normative claims, competing worldviews, deny skep, or ability to make normative claims of relevant desirability, and reciprocity is key to fairness and ensures equal access to the ballot. CX.
Okay. Ready?
Yes.
Okay. Your Pringles card, let's go there first. What is his, let me see. What is his occupation?
His occupation? Okay, I know what argument you're going to go for, so I'm going to do it now. Yeah, he's the mayor, but he's citing like economic statistics of what happened.
Sounds pretty good. Okay. Fayed 17.
Yep.
Exactly what is the impact of this?
Okay, so increased police presence in minority neighborhoods is bad because that increases the likelihood of like police brutality and violence occurring. It's also just like causes criminalization, i.e. when white people move in, they start criminalizing activities like having a too loud barbecue or like just hanging out on the street.
On Carpenter and Ross 07, the impact is just psychological violence, correct?
Well, yes, but it like also manifests in like literal health issues too.
Okay.
Or like physical health issues. Psychological violence is a health issue.
Your Albright 17 card indicates that like about half the card or a little bit more is talking about these mixed use development along a 22-mile industrial rail line. Exactly how is that economic development takings?
Sure. So if you really want to get like economic development debate, I will read evidence that redevelopment is explicitly economic development. The fact that they're taking land to try and like improve property values is economic development.
Was that the express purpose of this project?
Well, like what do you mean by the express purpose? Like how do we verify like what their intent was?
No, that's exactly what I'm asking. Was that the intent or
like
not?
It was legally categorized under redevelopment, which is topical.
Okay, sounds pretty good.
Also, like the other half of the card is tons of very obviously eminent domain for economic development takings.
Okay, that sounds pretty cool. Okay, that's it. Okay, running pro. guess I'll just forward you the scoop job.
Yeah. Should like the pile on the chain.
What?
Just how many off?
It's gonna be 2 off case.
Yeah, I'm assuming case is top down.
Yeah, yeah. And then I'm just gonna be. I have all the cards in there that I'm gonna read. So you're good.
Like the case. Okay.
Yeah, case cards. Okay. Should be soon.
I got it.
Okay.
That's fine.
Alright, 2 off case. Everyone ready? Okay, we're going. Yeah. Everyone else ready? The theorizing the 1AC relies on assumptions that rarely come true in the real world. Boudreaux 14. Too many demonstrations feature a miracle step to the assumption that politicians are superhuman reality of politics, making it likely that interventions that succeed on a chalkboard will do so in the real world. Vote neg on presumption, shifting the burden of the app to the burden of proof to the app is incentivizes better practice, holding the high standard of inductive reasoning. Elementary 7. There must be uniform standard of validity, otherwise we have no guarantee that our decision will be warranted by data and not the result of believing what we want to believe. There are too many theories which explain no past data, such are not inductive generalizations. There is uncertainty in all science, and inductive logic provides a quantification for this uncertainty by associating probabilities with laws. A useful starting point for generalization is that all variations considered random unless shown otherwise. When a researcher proposes a new effect, the burden is on them to show data to support the effect. The initial hypothesis is no effect unless shown otherwise. Second off. Democrats are said to win control Congress in midterms, but victories unassured. Any political win for conservatives could tip the balance. Share 7-2. Liberal agitation over market separation have left Democrat leaders scrambling to keep the outrage they counted on to fuel midterm election for becoming a liability. Obama urged Democrats to aim their energies on the ballot box. It is entirely within our power to solve political problems. Polls show Democrats maintain both an enthusiasm advantage and an advantage in the generic ballot. The Apple versus liberal victory over rallies of Republicans are because conservatives abhor eminent domain. Breitbart 16. The American aristocracy is using the power of the law to clear citizens off valuable land. The rural population is left to scratch out a living on the land it has left as the Greens rounded up their determination to rid the land of any remaining rabble. The force of economic conservation can be thwarted. Today's American Greens are busily writing their own versions of savage laws, yet all is not lost. The people have won before and they can win again. And this is exactly the win that Trump needs to energize his base and to win the midterms. Absent the app, Democrats have the capacity to control Congress. Ball is 6:30. The midterms will be about intensity. Trump has traded approval for intensity. The lack of intensity for Clinton helped doom her candidacy. In a divided country, Trump has pursued a tragedy of energizing his supporters rather than expanding his circle. The president has been holding rallies and boosting his support for Republicans challenging Democrats. The landscape tilts against the president of the party this year. Democrats underestimated Trump in 2016. They need to match the president in their capacity to energize the potential voters. And Obamacare repeal lost by 1 vote in the Senate last year. If conservatives win even a handful of seats, Obamacare is doomed. Bacon 18. Republicans search for an agenda and healthcare is a natural place for them. The political environment in 2019 could force Republicans to move in a more conservative direction. They will not be scared to vote for an Obamacare repeal. After all, they voted for one in the run-up to 2018 and kept those seats. More conservative factions are likely to have more influence in 2019. The Freedom Caucus pushed for Obamacare repeal even after the adverse failure. A repeal of Obamacare destroys health insurance for those who need it. EPI 17. 29.8 million people would lose their health insurance if the ACA were repealed. Fewer dollars spent at the grocery store and other businesses means 1.2 million jobs would be lost. And a lack of health insurance is linked to higher mortality rates. Best studies prove. Wool Handler 17. The uninsured have worse survival rate. The only randomized controlled trial that has assessed the health effects of insurance suggests a clinically important decrease in mortality. On case. First on Albright 17, this is not specifically specific to eminent domain or economic development. He specifically says that it's mixed-use development and off Carpenter and Ross 09. First of all, this is also not specific to economic development. It's just talking about eminent domain writ large, not about like the actual harms of eminent domain for economic development takings. And second of all, this references outdated studies from the 60s and 80s. This is not the same as like the world right now. We need to be looking at actual evidence that talks to the real world, like right now. And then off Cohen 06. First, there's no racial bias for this study because it's specific to eminent domain for economic development. Burn 11. Claims that eminent domain for economic development will disproportionately harm minorities draw on the 60s when many African Americans were displaced and failed attempt to modernize such concerns in our time were misplaced. Eminent domain continued to be an invaluable tool for maintaining the livability of urban areas. Discriminatory elements have been largely eliminated by the growth of political power by minorities officials. Avoid displacement because of the negative political repercussions and expensive litigation. The condemnation of homes is rare and has no identifiable ethnic or racial character. Second of all, this specifically addresses the tag of his card, which talks about how the minorities have a lack of political clout. Talks about, specifically, minorities have had more political clout recently than they used to have. This means that the character of eminent domain has changed dramatically since it used to be. That means you should not actually be looking to his outdated evidence, but instead preferring Byrne 11. Off Carpenter and Ross 07. First turn, the healthcare, when you lose healthcare, that's like a form of psychological violence because you never know like what you're gonna actually do, and this actually exacerbates psychological violence because it means that he says in his cross-examination that it also causes real health harms, but when you can't like actually solve those health harms if you don't have healthcare in the first place. You can look to Woolhandler 17 on that. And second, turn. Gentrification allows for those who stay to escape the cycle of poverty. Bottom 15. There can be an upside associated with gentrification. New amenities benefit not only the newcomers but long-term residents too. Freeman's 2004 study found that low-income African Americans are actually more likely to reign in gentrified neighborhoods than stagnant ones. Similar results were found in Boston. 2013 study found that low-income residents gain from gentrification. The idea that income whites are forcing out large numbers of blacks has yet to be demonstrated. You can look to this for a couple of reasons. First, this means that they're going to be able to actually escape from the cycle of poverty. Cycle of poverty outweighs psychological violence for a couple of reasons. First, cycle of poverty is necessarily cyclical. It involves not just the generation right now, but also the generations of the future. It means that when you are able to break out the cycle of poverty, you're not only helping the people right now. That means that it outweighs on scope, and second of all, on magnitude, because this controls the internal link to actual psychological violence. Because when these people are kept in these situations of actual poverty, that means that they don't actually know what they're going to do next. For example, if you don't have enough money to be able to afford meals, then you are living meal to meal, not knowing how you are going to pay for the next one. That's intense psychological violence. And then, off Pringle 7, first of all, this is the mayor of Anaheim. Of course he's going to agree with the ban. He implemented the ban. This is very, very biased evidence. You can't actually buy this. You can't look to this. This is his solvency advocate, but it's completely not true. And then, this is exactly what Zellner 07 indicts. He's talking about how people just believe what they want to believe. That is exactly what Pringle is doing. And then second of all, he's going to say in his next speech that he's citing economic studies, but once again, of course, the mayor would be citing economic studies that agree with him. He's not going to be citing things that say that he messed up. That is not what politicians do. Look to Zellner 07 on this. We can actually be looking at this as a solvency advocate, and if I prove that this is not actually a reason to actually believe that it's generalizable to the rest of the United States, then you should be presuming that automatically. So a couple reasons that you should be looking to the neg in this round. First of all, off Bodner at 15, talking about the cycle of poverty and how that outweighs the entirety of the case. Second of all, the DA means that he's actually causing 30 million people to be in intense situations where they're going to probably die.
CX?
Yep, CX.
Alright, cool.
That's what's next.
Let's start on the Zellner evidence. Why does this mean we automatically vote neg on presumption? Okay, so Zellner 07 is talking about how the app has to have a burden of proof where they're going to need to prove that they not only can list off a series of harms, but also that they can actually solve those harms in the first place. Why shouldn't we just if there are assuming no negative impacts, take the risk that we prevent something bad from happening?
Zellner 07 talks about how you have to actually have these studies that prove what you are saying is true before you can just assume that it's true.
Okay, but why wouldn't we just vote off a risk of doing something good if we prove there's no risk if there's a big risk to negating?
I would say that if they're stuck between a risk of offense for the app and a risk of offense for the neg, then that means that you presume neg.
Wait, so even if there's risk of offense for app and no risk of offense for neg, you still negate?
No, I said that if there is a risk of offense for the neg, risk of offense for app, you negate.
Oh, cool. So if I just turn the disad terminal defense and then
nope.
have risk of offense off the app?
No.
What's no?
I would still have risk of offense on the app.
How would
on
you
all case turns and
obviously
everything.
I'm saying I'm extending the app. Alright, that's fine. Let's go to the disad.
You never said that you were responding to case turns in that scenario.
Okay. The Balls 630 evidence is literally talking about how Trump is rocketing up his intensity. How can that disprove your unique evidence?
No, that's not what he's saying. Balls 630 says that the strategy for the Republicans needs to be to intensify and energize their base.
Okay.
I mean, it's specifically what the card is saying.
That's not
like you can't actually.
We'll have that debate.
Okay.
Why should I believe Breitbart represents every conservative? Like this article was written by somebody who doesn't even have a name on the website. They're just a guest user.
Okay, you can make that argument. What's your question?
Why should we believe it?
Why should we believe it?
Yeah.
Because it shows like the conservative perspective.
Okay. Let's start on the Bodner 15 evidence. Is this specific to eminent domain stuff?
Yeah.
Bodner 15 is about gentrification caused by eminent domain.
Let's see. It's talking about gentrification in general.
So no.
I mean, okay, whatever. We can have that.
On the Byrne 11 evidence, what studies is it specifically indicting? Like, what does it cite?
Byrne 11?
Yeah.
It's just, wait, what do you mean?
Like, it's references it claims, but like, whose claims is it talking about?
We can have that debate.
I'm asking you a question about whose claims it talks about. That's not a debate.
I mean, it's a case study of like, wait 1 second. Let me read.
That's not the.
Okay, what's your question then?
My question is, whose claims is it talking about as wrong?
Well, John Burns is talking about it.
But whose claims is he saying are wrong? Answer the question. Mine?
Like, your
so not my authors. Oh, he's citing my authors. Read me a line that cites Carpenter and Ross.
Oh, no, it's not talking about your authors necessarily, but it's talking about people who make that claim.
How does that...
That assertion.
Whatever. Start right now. On there, 236 U's. Also note the doc. It's like the app is still in the doc, but the terms and stuff are all at the bottom of it.
Sounds good. Starting off on midterms? Okay.
No. Well, like there'll be evidence in there about midterms, but like it's gonna go.
It's just
case, the presumption thingy, case top down presumption thing.
So it's stuff that you've
So it's case and then order of the one entity. Is everybody good? All right, awesome. So case, presumption, dissat. Starting now. Eminent domain is set. The government steals land for black communities against their will and denies them any opportunity to fight back, replacing the burden of proof on them. It's an empirical fact that eminent domain disforcing targets marginalized communities since they have less political power to fight back. This enables gentrification, terrorism, causes two impacts, massive psychological violence, and increased likelihood of police violence and criminalization. So, now on the FLM line, first off, all right 17 says it's not specific economic development. Yes, it is. It's literally about redevelopment, which is specifically to improve neighborhoods and make them better. What making them better actually means is taking them away and replacing them with more expensive homes that aren't accessible to minority communities, i.e. when they took away 1,195 units of public housing in Atlanta and replaced them and only made the houses available to 7% of the previous residents extend. All right 17, eminent domain is necessary for gentrification, causes massive displacement of black communities. This is empirics, and these are recent empirics from the 21st century, which is going to disprove with Bird 11 claims, then go to Carbon Ross. 9 first, he just says non-specific eminent domain and says it references old studies. None of that is drawn out of the evidence. He doesn't cite any lines to the evidence or say it's citing old studies. He just makes these assertions. It is specific to eminent domain. It is specific to economic development. Just proves that in general is far more likely to affect minorities who are low income and are going to be renters, means they aren't getting any compensation at all in the first place. All the money only goes to their landlord. That's empirical proof that eminent domain for economic development is far more likely to affect low income minorities. Not the Cohen 6. He says no bias. He reads Bird 11. There's no actual studies in this. It's just the author making a bunch of research and saying, oh, there's no empirics, but he's not citing any empirics. He's specifically disproving. He's not citing his own empirics in the first place, which means my stats are recent, i.e. the Albright 17 evidence, or the Cohen, or the Carbon or Ross 9 evidence, all are from the 21st century, showing actual empirics and citing specific examples or studies. We're giving you certain numbers. You should remember this because it's actually citing specific empirics. They're not the impact layer of Carbon Ross 7. He doesn't address the fact that the eminent domain intrinsically causes psychological violence, i.e. the indication of the evidence is that when you take somebody from their home and rep them from their community, that causes psychological and health harms in the first place. I don't need to win any link chain to gain access to these impacts. It is an intrinsic function of eminent domain that it causes psychological violence and health problems. Then you read the Bodner 15 evidence. This is not about eminent domain. We say specifically eminent domain causes problems, so when they take the land, they're not actually improving it. They're just building things that increase the cost of living. Bodner 15 is not a very good card. It's just about gentrification generally and reads a few specific cases. When I'm showing you multiple instances of eminent domain specifically causing bad gentrification and hurting people, you should refer that. Then he completely concedes the 517, which is the fact that when gentrification occurs, white people start moving into neighborhoods and they're way more likely to call the police, which increases the likelihood of police violence and criminalization, which is an independent impact. And then off the Pringle 7 evidence. He says the mayor played to the band and that it's very unlikely that he's biased. This is still the only empirical example of a ban. He says there's other studies that might be bad. Then read them, cut the evidence. If the only empirics in the round show that bans are good, you should probably err aff on that question. And he's providing warrants saying that when eminent domain, none of the projects were ever fulfilled in Anaheim in the first place, which means they were just leaving empty lots there, which was hurting the economy and not causing any development. Then, on the presumption argument. First, he talks about the Butcher 14 article. He says making a bunch of assumptions. The group the Zellner 7 evidence wrote for whoever has the bigger risk of offense in the round. Usually that was cross-examination. He says whichever one has a more likely risk of offense. He says we both have risk of offense, vote neg, but that's assuming it's equal risk of offense. If I'm winning a massive risk of the case and he has a really, really tiny risk of the dissat, then you should probably still vote in the first place. Also, I'm citing data, which means I meet Zellner 7's requirements. He says you need to prove empirical instances and have data backing your facts. I just read a bunch of cards. The only card you read cited almost no empirics, and then the second card you read was not specific to the topic at all, which means I'm definitely meeting Zellner far better than you ever are. Now, the dissat. First off, the uniqueness. Republicans win the midterm that gets to Scofield, filibuster proof majority. Best empirics proof with 30 plus year to date, and other evidence doesn't count for returning partisan voters. Kilgore 630. New Pew report makes it clear what kind of man Democrats are calling the majority Senate election in 2013, but one by candidates party that won the state. Recent presidential race coordinated analysis elections also going back to 1980 of the 38 Senate elections held in 2013-14, all but 3 near 2012 victory for Democrats like West Virginia statesmen for Trump by 42 points, and North Dakota Trump by 35 points, Raleigh ticket splitting at a level we hadn't seen in a while. Even McCaskill and Donnelly have to worry about a trend towards GOP partisans coming home. Could be a real problem. 26 Democrat pay was an overwhelming front runner, but lost by 10 points as voters returned. 2016 zero mismatch rate prevailed. Republicans would gain 9 seats and secure filibuster for majority privilege to his evidence that accounts for the concept of returning voters, which the polls his evidence citing don't hide the fact that people who aren't in the area to be polled in the first place return during midterms. Those are disproportionately GOP members. Then, on the link. One-term conservatives will backlash over the main since it's key to secure property for the border wall. Martin 18. Feasibility Trump follow constricting one necessity and domain of private property. About 2/3 of the land the border is owned by private or is owned by private is private. Sorry. Outweighs the links to immigration to bigger midterms issues and domain. Show me one can you even talk about in their speech. Also, if they're Breitbart 17 evidence, it is just by a random user, not an actual author even for Breitbart. He's a terrible piece of evidence. Then the eminent domain likely doesn't read links. It's not a big enough issue. I just didn't read the second analytic turn in the doc.
Oh, that's it. Okay, starting prep. Okay. Or just gonna be disadd, and then add.
Okay, so nothing on the presumption thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Are you reading anything new?
No.
Okay.
I don't believe so. No, no. Okay. Ready?
Yep. We're good.
Okay. All good? Okay.
Is he?
DA
I feel like I should check before the 1AR now.
DA app. Okay, ready? Okay. On the uniqueness of the disadvantage, he reads Kilgore 630, but first, like as a way to like attack Sheriff 7.2. But first, Kilgore is outdated, doesn't take into account subversion of immigrant families. That's specifically what Sheriff 7.2 is talking about how it actually impacted the political spectrum. And second, Kilgore is citing a Pew report from even further before. This means that even if he proves that Kilgore was writing fairly recently, then the Pew report was even further back. And third, the political climate is much different than it was 30 plus years ago. That means that the Pew report that it was talking about, which did data collection for like the past 30 years or so, does not actually take into account the political climate today and is much higher polarization. So clearly, like these issues have actually changed much. Like Democrats are more polarized because of like the whole immigrant separation issue, which makes like they're actually more energized to win. They're set to win right now. And then second, he reads another turn. He talks about the border wall outweighing. But first of all, the border wall is an economic development. Two warrants. First of all, Trump's rhetoric proves that it's actually a national security taking because like it's not meant for like economic development. And then second of all, most evidence says that it actually hurts economic development, like the economy. So no matter what his definition of economic development is, no matter how he tries to spin this in the next speech, it's not an economic development taking. We've had a border fence in the past, and that was not considered an economic development taking. There's no reason that the wall would be right now, which means like he doesn't actually like ban the wall, so it's still going to be popular among the conservatives. And then second of all, my Breitbart 16 card, he talks about how this is just Breitbart, and it's just a guess made by this. But first of all, it shows the conservative perspective. It means that even if he proves that generally, he reads no evidence that says that generally conservatives dislike this. All he does is try to take out this like the author index. And second of all, like Breitbart doesn't just let anybody post to it. They still have to like go through a verification process before like it is actually posted online. I know, it's Breitbart, guys, but this is the conservative perspective on things. It shows that they actually like absolutely hate eminent domain. It's like yes, that's just true. And then Ball 630 he talks about how this is the exact type of political win that Trump needs in order to like be able to mobilize the conservatives in order to actually win midterms. He never responds to this. And then next with the Bacon-18, which talks about how like when like they actually win the midterms, they're going to be focusing on actually repealing Obamacare. Looked at EPI 17 and Wool Handler 17, which talk about how this affects 30 million people. And it means that they're far more likely to die than they are right now. Okay. So this is not just going to affect like everybody. It's affecting like the worst off. It's clearly a form of oppression. And then on case. First of all, he makes a very damning concession in his last speech. On Bodener 15, all he does is say that this is not specific to eminent domain. This is an impact turn, David. We've learned about this in lab. Okay, this is talking about the cycle of poverty, and he drops all my analysis on this about how it outweighs, because it's not talking about just the current generation, but the actual generation for the next few years, and like the next two generations, as well as completely turns to psychological violence, because it means that these people who are trapped in poverty are actually like able to escape poverty, which means that they're able to escape more psychological violence than in the status quo. And then also, this also interacts with PHL 17 because it means that like when they're able to escape from poverty, like we clearly know that these people who are trapped in poverty are more targeted by police violence. That means that this actually turns that advantage as well. And then on the rest of the case, first off, Pringle 07, He talks about how this is the only empirical example and that I should just be reading more cards. What I'm saying is that it's his burden to actually prove that he's able to solve this. He has no solvency in his entire case. He never proves that he's actually going to be able to fix any of the issues in the affirmative whatsoever. Like, he just has no real solvency for this. All he does is just list harms. All right, 17, he talks about how like this is redevelopment is clearly like a form of economic development. But that's not what his card says. His card is talking about how he's creating mixed use things, not like specifically for economic development. So like that card is just not specific to the resolution. It means that he's not actually going to be able to solve anything coming off that. And then next, he completely drops the fact that both Carpenter and Ross 09 and Cohen 06 are citing studies from the 60s and 80s, not recent studies. The political climate has completely changed from them because like minorities actually do have more clout than they used to have. So you should be looking at Burn 11 because Burn 11 is specifically talking about eminent domain in the context of economic development takings, which none of his cards do. All of his cards are just talking about eminent domain, not eminent domain for economic development takings. So that's like most specific to the actual resolution at hand. He also never like responds to the fact that when you lose healthcare, you're going to have net worse psychological violence because you have no idea how you're going to be able to like improve any of the conditions in your life. If you fall sick, you have no idea how you're going to be able to afford the medical bills necessary to be able to actually heal yourself. He talked about how this causes actual like actual physical health issues. But in the world of the negative, you're actually able to fix those health issues using the Affordable Care Act. But under the world of the affirmative, if you have any health issues, you're not going to be able to solve those because you just can't afford to. So we have to be looking at who best minimizes oppression. You can look to the negative for a few reasons. First of all, I outweigh on scope. I give you exactly 30 million people are going to be affected by the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. Which means that they're also going to, it also outweighs on magnitude because these people have a higher likelihood to die. These are the worst off in society because these are the people who cannot actually afford to other health coverage, and it means that they're far more likely to die. And then also on the Bodner 15 turn, he never actually responds to this. This is the only way that we can actually truly solve oppression in the round is by giving these people further access to new resources, and that's what gentrification actually does. Yeah. Thus, you negate.
No, that's a concession. I have one. Hold on, bad math. I have 124 left. Starting now.
It's already being recorded. That's why there's a big microphone. The order is case, then the disad. It's going to start on the Bodner 15, the impact turn. Is everybody good? All right. Starting. Off the only piece of offense he has in case off Bodner 15, he says it's an impact turn to justification, but I say justification is uniquely specific and different when it's created by using eminent domain. That is the alright 17 events when it displaces people, and they say they're going to build affordable housing. That's a different kind of justification than the natural process of gentrification. Your Bodner 15 evidence describing it's not a question of this is just an impact turn, but the specific impact of gentrification is different when eminent domain is used to create gentrification in the first place. That's really, really key because his evidence is not specific to the gentrification caused by eminent domain. So, on extending that,
First of all, VBI18 says it's about mixed use. No, all these stats are reading economic development takings to help the economy. When they say, oh, we're going to improve the economy by rebuilding your houses and making measures to generate more property and tax revenue. That is them trying to help the economy, but really, it's not available to people who they displaced in the first place. Only 7% of them get rehousing. Is not answer the fundamental question that eminent domain displaced people from their homes. That off the carbon Ross 9 evidence. He conceded the extension that does not answer in the final speech. This is really important to prove empirically you are far more likely to be affected by economic development takings eminent domain if you are a minority. Then off the burn 9, off the burn 11 evidence. He's conceded the argument that 1, it does not actually describe any empirics. It just makes assertions that other people's claims are wrong, but it doesn't cite any studies or any actual numbers. And my stats are all very recent. VBI18 is citing stuff that happened in the 21st century. So are carbon Ross 9. That was not answered. Then on the impact, first off, carbon Ross 7. I don't even need to win the gentrification argument to gain access to this impact, i.e. the fact that cycle of violence intrinsically happens from eminent domain because it is taking people from their home, is not going through the link chain of gentrification, but it's specific and just intrinsic to eminent domain in the first place. The fact that you, against your will, are taken from your home and driven from your community. Then at the VBI18, he is not answering this enough. There is massive increase in police violence and criminalization when you allow gentrification to happen. His bond 15 evidence is not specific to the kind of gentrification created by eminent domain. The fact that people are forcibly displaced from their homes and not the opportunity to return, i.e. which is far different than natural gentrification. Look, the impact turn does not understand that there is a difference between gentrification created via eminent domain, where people are forcibly removed, and the different kinds of gentrification that happen as a more natural free market process. Then, on Freedom 7, he just says it's my burden to solve, but he doesn't respond to any of the answers I make to his arguments. This is the only empirics read in round about a ban. Even if you think they might be slightly biased, it is still the only empirical study cited in the entire round that says a ban actually helped the economy in the first place. You should really vote on that evidence. Now on the dissat. First on uniqueness. He has conceded the reason you prefer Kilgore authority is that polls fail. The polls, his evidence is citing failure, account for returning the voters. The fact that people who are actually surveyed by polls return closer to the midterms and they're more likely to be GOP partisan voters. That was really important in the Kilgore 630 evidence, which he did not answer. He says Kilgore's old and doesn't understand immigration. Immigration literally happened well before all the immigration issues were happening well before June 30th. It means that definitely still understands those. Then he says the data is from 30 years. No, it's been collected since 30 years, but it also doesn't only rely on that. It still does regular analysis, just like your evidence does, except a lot better because it accounts for returning voters. Then on the link. First, he says it's not for the economy. Yes, it is. Trump's constant rhetoric is they're stealing our jobs. They're going to take your jobs. Then he says that most evidence says the border wall hurts the economy. Well, obviously that's probably true, but the conservatives don't want to believe that. Like they don't want to believe the border wall is racist in the first place. Obviously, they're just wrong about it. They think it's going to help the economy. Then he's conceded the link line, which is that immigration is a much bigger midterms issue than eminent domain ever will be. Nobody's ever talked about it in a single speech, but immigration is a really big issue. Also, he's conceded the implication. That means it probably won't trigger the link in the first place. Round is really clear. His impact turn doesn't answer the specific kind of gentrification created by eminent domain, and he is not winning his dissat or even a risk of it. Affirmed.